In this episode of the Veteran Business Community Podcast, I'm talking with a good mate of mine, Dan Fussell. Now, not too many artillery officers can claim to have fired guns downrange in anger, but Dan got to do that on Op Herrick in Afghanistan with the British, and he also went back as a forward observer with the Aussie Army. Now, we talk about Dan's journey through Artillery Corps, into Army Adventure Training Wing, into taking those skills into building a great business called Keltus, who teaches corporates how to do all that fun stuff that we did in adventure training. And we also, importantly, note and recognise and have a quick chat about Dan's brother Mick, who was killed in Afghanistan. So stick around and have a really personal chat with me and Dan. Stick around. G'day there, it's Pete Liston here, and welcome to another episode of the Veteran Business Community Podcast, where I'm talking with a mate of mine, Dan Fussell, today. G'day, Fuss.
Hey, mate, how are you?
Mate, I'm good. I've wanted to have a chat to you for ages, apart from just having a chat with a mate and catching up. But you're one of the stories, you dream it, you can be it, you see it, you can be it, particularly with the work you're doing at Keltus. I was looking at your website a little bit earlier today and turning cliffs, caves, rivers and oceans into your training ground. Mate, what a gig.
Yeah, it's good. It's it feels good. As hard as small business is, it feels good to be finally living the dream or the vision that I wanted probably since about 2012.
Yeah.
So to finally be doing it and being in the graft, but trying to see out the work as a passion kind of a plan is really fulfilling.
But I love this, that your adventure through journey and through life got you to this point. But let's go right back because, look, my background is similar but different to yours. Country, less, just definitely not grown up in a city. Tell us about where you grew up and what was life was like. Was it New England?
Wales? Yeah, New England. Yeah, it's spot on. New England, Armidale. So born in Tamworth and then moved to Armidale, and yeah, every time I I answer this question, I feel I get reminded how good my childhood was.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I grew up in Armidale, which is the main part I really remember, and I was on about 25, 30 acres. Dad grew up riding horses and just wanted the same for my brother and I. So not long after we moved there, when I was 5, we sort of got our first horse at about six or 7, and yeah, just grew up on the 30 acres, riding horses, competing horses, playing pipe gun wars with the neighbours and just getting up to all sorts of mischief, playing in the dams, going rabbit hunting. We weren't allowed rifles when we were younger, probably sensible. But we found the loophole of bows and arrows and
slug guns.
Yeah, slug guns, like just anything we get up to. That was kind of the childhood. So we're 17 kilometres out of town, which isn't that prohibitive in the scheme of things, but it requires the parents to drive you in and out. Yeah. So we had some neighbours up the road that similar age to both, well, same age as myself, and the older bloke was a year younger than my brother. So we sort of found some friends in there and some accomplices, and sort of ran amok around the neighbourhood more often than not, and didn't go sort of town was for sport and school and that sort of thing.
I love it, mate. 30 acres is a good sized block. Plenty of room to get the bikes out, get the horses out, and just have that space to roam. Cubby houses, mate. I grew up in the Blue Mountains, but spent a lot of my time on the weekends in Bathurst. Around that kind of country, and I feel it's probably very similar. We had families, that had uncles and aunties that had farms out of town, and I used to just love being out there, man. And you mentioned not getting access to rifles, that early, but when did you get your first 22? Like, probably not at 8, but how old were you?
No, so Mum looks back on this and wonders whether it was a solid strategy, but we weren't allowed. We weren't allowed guns as toys when we were kids, and then it just. She thinks maybe that was the wrong strategy, because then we went the other way, and we started making ones that shoot berries and stealing the washing up glove fingers.
The pipe guns.
To then shoot berries, and she'd go to do the washing up and just missing 3 fingers, and we just got creative and innovative, and but I think Dad had a rifle license early on, and but then for work with forestry, but then he rose the ranks, and so we never really had rifles, but we would. There's about 5 or 6 properties around us that all used to be one big part of Somers Homestead, or the whole area around Armidale there, south of or west of Armidale used to be Somers Homestead, and then they gradually divided it up, subdivided as they do. But as a result, you could access. There's a gate to every neighbour. So we only had 30 acres, but we sort of roamed about 500 acres around us at the neighbours' places, and we're very close with them, and they were right into shooting. So we did a lot. I don't know. We would have been. I think there was a rite of passage to sort of shoot a shotgun at 12 years old or something. I think my friend's dad just enjoyed seeing us fall flat on our bum. So pretty young on that one, and then as we got older, through the teens, we sort of started going rabbit shooting and all the rest of it.
So you alluded to the getting into the military and playing with bigger guns. What led you into the army?
Yeah, so my brother was 3.5 years older than me, and so when he left home, I want to say 2001, he must have started ADFA. So I got a good look. So when he finished school, I must have been, I was year 9. So I had 3 more years left of school. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I left school. I probably struggled later on through school, and talking to careers advisors that we had at school that were really amazing, trying to nut out what I actually wanted to do. And I felt like everyone else around me kind of decided, like they had a really clear path from even year 8, year 9, that they were going to be doctors, or they were going to be nurses or lawyers or whatever. And so I was still looking. The only thing I knew, like my requirement is that I didn't want to do a desk job straight away. Like I wanted to be in the outdoors. I wanted challenge. I was craving something along those lines, and everything else just looked like years of study and more years of study and straight behind a desk. And as we know, officers end up pretty much that way anyway. But it certainly, as you know, it wasn't like that early on, and it was kind of what I craved. And anyway, so I knew my requirements. I just didn't know what the job was. And then Mike gave me my brother gave me pretty much a free look at it. So I was watching him go through ADFA, and he was having a great time, not just with the training, but being a military artist through ADFA, he was having a great time going surfing and overseas holiday mates, and Mooseheads, getting paid to study, and I was like, this looks pretty good.
No, it's not a bad gig.
Yeah, I was like, there's something in this, anyway, so I went down that path. Probably played too much rugby at school and didn't apply myself enough to my academics. So whilst I got accepted to ADFA, my UAI didn't pass the muster, but kindly the Army turned around and offered me a place through RMC. And I was actually out doing farmhand work, because I then had a gap. I didn't start ADFA in January after school. I had a gap while the Army figured out what to offer me or do next. And so I was out doing some farmhand work between Moree and Collarenebri, which was pretty hard going. And
it's hot country out there, man.
Hot country, and we were doing harvest. And anyway, Mum got a letter. And she called and said, do you want me to open it? I was like, yep. And she's like, you've been accepted into the Army, into Bridges Company.
Bridges Company.
Where I met your business partner, Matthew Mosley. And she's like, they didn't give me much notice. Hey, it was like a 3-week notice to move. And so I was just like, yep, that's great. I'm doing it. And I pretty much drove off the property the next day and headed for home, and then packed my bags and off we went. And it turned out to be really fortunate. Like you would have heard a bit about Bridges Company right now, but that's actually where I got the first taste of Keltus. So yeah, we did the first 4 weeks is literally the Army reserve course, so the 4-week course through Kapuka. So just real basics, just so we can march around the area and handle the rifle and just inoculation or ab initio training into the military. But then we basically marched over the hill about 500 metres away to the adventurous training wing, and we got by the adventurous training wing staff got put through about 6 or 7 weeks of adventurous training.
What a start! What a start to military career, mate. This is false expectations about this. How good this is going to be.
It's probably about 10 times more adventurous training than most people do in their whole careers, right? And it was somewhat false advertising because I did a lot up front and then not a lot after that out in units and that sort of thing. But it was amazing. We did 2 weeks of abseiling climbing, 2 weeks of sea kayaking, and then spent 2 weeks walking the Hume Hovel track for about 275 kilometres or something of the 400 that I think it is. And so I was just like, amazing. I've arrived. This is what I was after. And then obviously came back down to earth and started RMC proper with yourself mid-year of 2006 and came back down to earth, and I was like, okay, this is a bit more serious than Bridges Company.
Mate, so just a quick one. So Bridges Company are for the lads that are probably, Army's not really sure. They see potential in them, but they're really young. Like you guys are all like fresh out of school, like 17, 18. And so they throw you out and they do this, 12 or whatever a week course is, just to bring you, test your maturity and just to sort of bring you together before you get thrown into the deep end. But what is it, 12 weeks?
Yeah, I reckon it's probably about 12 weeks. I think I enlisted on the 13th of March and then obviously started RMC in about June, July. So, and we had a little break before RMC, but no, that's exactly right. Because obviously the difference is, there was no issues being accepted into ADFA because I would have done 3 years of study and been 21, 22 when I eventually got to RMC for my 4th year. Whereas alternatively, going into RMC, I was probably 18 when I started RMC, 19 shortly following. So it's just a case of you exhibited the qualities, but
have you got to grow up a little bit. Well, mate, I had my 31st birthday 1 week after I joined RMC, so a totally different reality, mate. And talking about UAIs, I remember when I got my UAI, I opened it up and I was just like, ooh. That's probably not. That's the university admission index. That's basically you score out 100 to see whether you get into college or not. And then instead of looking at the courses I could get into, it was like, well, what? Let's see how low this bar is to jump. And there was only 2 courses. I think there was only 3 courses that I could do with my UAA. One was nursing, one was horticulture, and one was a maths teacher. They were the only 3 options that open to me out of every university course in the state. So I don't know what they want to put maths teachers in with people who get 55 UAIs. But, mate, got through RMC, went into artillery corps. Why'd you choose artillery? Or did artillery choose you?
Well, I don't know. It was an interesting one. I think for memory, I wanted Cav. I think I was pretty obsessed with ASLAVs at the time, and so artillery wasn't my first preference, and it was interesting because I was pretty, as you know, like it's a defining day. You've done 18 months of pretty hard training, and some people walk out of that room after core allocation really happy, and some don't. And
some end up in tears, no names. But I do remember, because you just sit there and then all of a sudden, like, this is your future on the next PowerPoint slide. Click, you are going to this core. Yeah.
And you think it's super defining, but it's, and it took me a while, as you know, it usually didn't take me long to get to Mooseheads. I wasn't a late arriver, but I was that night. I took a bit of time because I actually went, I think I went for a run or something up Mount Ainslie, and then I called my brother, and I was upset.
Who was also artillery corps?
Who was also artillery, and that's kind of why I was upset because, I started RMC 6 months after Mike graduated. So he graduated December 2005. We started June 2006, and so a lot of the directing staff, the sergeants, the captains, they had instructed my brother as well, and so that attracted a little bit of attention You know, I was automatically Little Fuss, despite the fact that he was smaller than me.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd get that in there, and you know, it attracted some heat. Most of it was, you know, well intended and just good banter, but I was kind of sick of it. You know what I mean? Like I kind of wanted to forge my own path, and I had no issue being associated with my brother, obviously.
Yeah, I mean,
But I just didn't. I wasn't sure that I wanted to go through the rest of my career with the same kind of attention.
Yeah.
In artillery corps, and was keen to forge my own path. And I called him, and he totally got it. And but he also said that he said it doesn't really matter your core preference or what you're allocated. He pointed out that like nobody really actually knows enough about the cores at the end of 18 months training on what it's actually like, and there's a good chance that if you throw yourself 100% into it, you'll never look back, and you'll have opportunities that you never thought you'd have, and you know, kind of wise words. He turned out, and he also provided me the backstop. He's like, you can call transfer. He's like, do a year, do 2 years. If you still don't like it, there's avenues for you. But he's like a remarkably low percentage of people ever actually call transfer. And he was 100% right. And I think that was true to our cohort. Very few, even ones that were unhappy with their core, ended up actually core transferring. And I got out there, I threw myself into it, and I loved the job, and the opportunities that came my way were amazing. And yeah, I absolutely wouldn't change a thing. And if anything, I would pick it first, because the deployments I did and whatnot were much less likely in an ASLAV. So,
oh man. So in a state of utter ignorance and not knowing the realities of the army, I remember thinking about people that went to artillery corps thinking, man, these guys aren't going to get any gigs whatsoever. They're not going to put guns overseas. And then, man, you guys got more gigs than anyone, ultimately at the end.
I think we thought the same, and that was probably some of my disappointment. But yeah, we came out at an interesting time, right? And I was probably attracted to Cav through past events rather than looking forward. And the Cavs have been, cavalry and ASLAVs have been prominent in Iraq, in convoy movement and that sort of thing, and they certainly played a role in Afghanistan still, particularly early on in overwatches and things like that, and convoy support. But yeah, we kind of, Iraq was wrapping up for when we finished up, and when we graduated, and then Afghanistan was in full flight. And yeah, pretty much as soon as I graduated, we graduated, the trip or the arrangement with the British forces kicked off for basically to supplement the Brit gun lines with half a troop, or two gun detachments plus a troop commander and a forward observer, and so that became the goal as for all of us, as Rob Hartley sort of was the one in front of me, and then I took over from Rob, and that became the sought after trip, and then forward observers. We both moved on to forward observer roles after that, and then started eyeing off forward observer roles in Uruzgan province, back with the Australians. So yeah, it was an amazing opportunity.
I didn't realise that you did that British trip as well. I know Rob did it.
Yeah.
You did that one as well after him.
Yeah, so straight after him. So we caught up both in the UK and in country, and or maybe I missed him in country. Yeah, because he's different base. But so it effectively involved 8 months of pre-deployment training in the UK after already doing 6 months of effectively pre-deployment training in Australia. So it was a long lead up, but yeah, getting to live out of Colchester in the UK with 16 Air Assault Brigade, and it was a pretty amazing experience. And we actually had 6 weeks leave whilst being in the UK, so there was a fair bit of Europe travel and that sort of thing. And we nicely got their summer break in August, right before deploying to Afghanistan in September 2010. Basically getting to lead a half Australian, half British gun line. It was an amazing experience, and Helmand Province was a bit of a different beast and a real eye-opener for me early on in my career. I think the thing that stood out for me was the maturity and the experience of the British forces at that point. They'd learnt a lot of hard lessons in Helmand, and been there for quite a while, to the point that some of the sergeants and warrant officers that I was deploying as part of my troop were on their 6th or 7th tour.
Yeah, wow.
So, approximately 6-month rotations, and they've done 6 or 7 of them. So they spent about 3 years of their life already in Helmand Province. And, I was on my first trip and meant to be leading the troop, but I learned a lot out of that trip. And the training reflected the lessons learnt leading up. Like, it was the most realistic training I've done, and I think the Australian Army inevitably caught up, but they were definitely behind at that point. And the example I often give is, the really realistic medical training, like using moulage to represent realistic injuries, and using people that have got amputated arm or something as part of that training, which was some very interesting businesses, and it's confronting training, and I actually really rate it because you don't. I'm a big believer through Keltus. You don't rise to the occasion; you sink to the level of your training. And if the first time you're confronted with that is on operations, then there's going to be a training gap. There's going to be a reaction time gap. But the training in the UK was so realistic and prepared us so well, and it really showed in the British forces and the Australian forces when we got to Helmand.
Mate, this is the only way you can learn this is by doing it. And can you tell me what guns did you have on the line there, and did you fire guns in support?
Yeah, we did. So, we're located down at Patrol Base 2 in Nurri Siraj South, and very similar guns. So, basically, our first 6 weeks in the UK was like a UK soldier officer conversion course. So, we converted from the Australian L119 to the British L118. So, both are a 105mm howitzer. The Brits had a better sighting system, and it had a bit more range, and a few other bits and pieces, but the soldiers were very familiar with it. So we converted, from a trade perspective on the guns. For myself in the command post, slightly different computation system, to be able to sort of run the gun line. But then we also transferred over from a small arms and heavy machine gun and grenade launcher perspective, because we had to use all their weapon systems, because Australia had no ability logistically to support us carrying Australian rifles and whatnot in Helmand Province. If one of our rifles broke, we couldn't get the Brits to fix it or get it back to an Australian system. So we just had to integrate into their operating system and logistics system completely, and communications, slight variances in medical training. The Brits can administer morphine and things like that. Slight nuances, but it was all done and dusted in 6 weeks, and then we basically just commenced pre-deployment training with the guys we're going with.
Mate, Afghanistan. The Fussell story in Afghanistan must recognise your brother as well. I never met your brother, but I do remember walking across the car park at 3RAR, and one of the bosses came over to me and he said, Fuss just got killed. And he broke down in tears because your brother was across the road. He was part of A Battery, which is associated with 3RAR for a while, and then he went across to 4 Commando at the time. Mate, can I just sort of recognise your brother and his service and what you and your family gave up for the nation? Is there anything you'd like to share about, I don't want to poke and prod too much here, mate, but I just want to recognise what you and your family have been through.
Yeah, cheers, mate. It's it's obviously a bit of a defining moment and a bit of a pivotal moment in my career and life, I guess. But he was, regardless of whether I wanted to be or not, he was somebody that I was following in the footsteps of most of my life. Like being 3.5 years younger than him, I spent most of my life trying to keep up with him, which I think actually put me in really good stead. Scared the hell out of mum because I was doing things I shouldn't be doing at a very young age, and as a result, sort of injuring myself, whether it was trying to ride bigger bikes or go faster on horses or jump bigger jumps or whatever it was. And that obviously went through to the military career, and I did feel like I was chasing him, and we're both highly competitive. So at the end of 2008, I was almost at the end of my first year at One Reg.
Yep.
and I think I was actually doing a combat fitness leaders course. You know how at the end of the year your collective training's wrapped up and everyone just chases a cool course or something to polish off December, and then get into leave. And I got myself onto a combat fitness leaders course, and I got pulled off that into the CEO's office, and I got told in Brisbane, and then sort of got home to Armidale, and then sort of attention after that. I was a bit worried in some ways for my career we've all seen the movie Saving Private Ryan, and the appetite, I think, for the military to tell the same family that another son's being killed is pretty low. And I was I was worried that was kind of going to end me before I'd started. And my CEO at the time, Stu Kenny, was good enough to be like, nothing will change. He wasn't guaranteeing me any trips or anything like that, but he said you'll be selected on merit, and I was like, that's good enough for me. And he sort of got me back into training the next year, and it wasn't long, probably 6-7 months later, we started gearing up for Op Eric and going with the Brits. So, but yeah, kind of, I don't know. I think I would have been, as you know, like I love the army and I love the job I did, and I was pretty dedicated to it anyway. But I felt like I was more serious about my job after that or something. I felt like I then had Mike really watching, or I owed him to deploy and do a good job, and I was pretty dedicated to it, and I kind of felt a responsibility on that front to sort of keep serving for a long period of time before sort of changing directions.
How'd your mum and dad take that? Were they fully supportive of you cracking on? This got to be a brutal time for the family, but it's ultimately your choices. As I'm honouring Mick by doing this.
Yeah, and that's probably how I felt. I think that was how I chose to honour him, whether healthy or not. But that was my outlet, and I was like, the best thing I can do to honour him is, he was brave enough to go and do the job, and I wanted to show that wasn't for nothing. And I kind of explained that to the parents. I think both would have preferred I didn't go, but they were never going to ask me to not go, and they were fully respectful of what I needed to do, and super supportive. I think it was probably more. I think probably family, friends, and whatnot were probably looking on, being like, "You got to stop doing this to them." They were probably less understanding of my reasoning and more sympathetic to the parents. But no, the parents were super supportive, and they were always there to wave goodbye, and the first to pick me up. And I remember Mum picking me up from the airport with she knew what I needed. She picked me up from the airport, walked out to the car, gave me a 6-pack, and then handed me off to Dave Hickey. And she's like, go spend the night with him, and have those, and we'll see you for breakfast in the morning. Yeah. She knew I didn't need it. She knew I wasn't after a debrief with the parents on a deployment. So, super understanding and super supportive.
But that was Brizzy Airport on the day you got back from Herrick, was it?
Yeah, that was in.
Good, mate.
That was in Brisbane.
What a moment, man! Getting off the plane, in uniform, carrying your bag, and there's Mum with a 6-pack. See you tomorrow, mate.
6-pack of Tooheys Extra Dry. She did well.
I love it. Mate, you ended up in what I would have thought would be the golden posting of the Army at Adventure Training Wing. How did you end up there, and what was that like? Because this is really now, from you being a country kid, horses, having fun, doing just bush stuff, to Bridges Company and getting an exposure into Adventurous Training Wing and doing, almost the full suite of courses, to ending up actually, are we commanding the OC of that unit down there?
Yeah, I was the 2IC first in 2016, and then I was the OC. I went straight into the OC posting in 2017-18.
So what's that gig like? It sounds like milk and honey, mate, is it...
Yeah, you'd think so. I'll come back to that. So after I got back from Herrick, I had about a year. So most of 2000, I think we got back in March 2011, and then that was the end of my troop command time, and it was time to get qualified as a forward observer. So, and I think I had to go and do captain's course. I went and did FO's course. So it was almost all individual courses, and then it was back into and then I was into more FO exercises back at the unit, and then I was deploying again in 2012. So I was basically back into pre-deployment training. But this time I went with the Aussies, and we specifically 7 Brigade Enablers supported 3RAR task group. So we effectively went to Townsville for 5 months, and I live with Rob and Fee Hartley for five months just off base at Dahlia or whatever that suburb is, just outside. Yep. Loverack Barracks, and did pre-deployment training with 3RAR Task Group, which were the infantry battalion that we were supporting, and so this was the first time I'd done Australian pre-deployment training, and we were sitting there doing the mandatory day, and I don't know if you remember Battle Smart, but it was the one psych or the Army's theory on how to recognise indicators of fear and stress in yourself on operations, and then actively and productively regulate your responses to that to those indicators, so that you can effectively just do your job and employ your skills. And I was sitting next to, and it's great theory. Like, I'm a big proponent of it.
I'm hearing theory here.
Correct. My only issue is leaving it as theory, and we had this great PowerPoint lesson, and then we broke off into some syndicate rooms, and we lay on our backs and did some deep breathing exercises, which is a great heart rate regulator, an emotional regulator. But we practiced that for 15 minutes. Time was short, had to get into the next thing. Went back into the big lecture theatre, and almost verbatim, as per every good military lesson, it was like, you've been taught the theory of managing your response to fear and stress. Next time you use this lesson is when you get shot at. And
you will now be relaxed. You have all the tools to be relaxed when you get shot at. You will be relaxed.
Yeah. I was like, that's a really big leap. Like, that's a giant leap. I was like, is this not a training gap? And it was just funny enough that I was sitting next to Dion Hawkett. I don't know if you ever come across Dion, but he was our battery sergeant major at the time. But he was also one of the guys that was posted to the adventurous training wing that had put me through Bridges Company.
Gotcha.
So very familiar with it, and he and I just had this moment where we looked at each other. I was like, we can't do any better than this. Like, the literal aim of adventurous training by Army doctorate at the time was to prepare soldiers and officers for battle. And yeah, it is literally to place people in a situation that exposes their indicators of fear and stress, and then to facilitate them through developing an effective coping strategy, a productive coping strategy, to be able to do that. Because whilst the situation might be different, the indicators that you show to one situation of fear and stress are more than likely going to be the same ones when you get shot at, or any other situation. You'll have the same indicators, because that's your body's default. And similarly, what works to regulate it in one scenario, if you've practiced that, like I said, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training. When your body's stressed and it's looking for a coping strategy, it'll go to the one that you've practiced. It's not going to invent one in the moment. It's going to go, hey, if we've done this, it's going to search. And it's going to be, if we've done this before, I'm going to use that and see if it works. So, yeah, I found that a really big leap. And obviously, I just sort of put that as a marker. There's nothing you can do about it then. I had pre-deployment training. I had an operation to go on. But I put that as a marker that I was like, hey, I really want to do something about that. And I spoke to a few people about it, but it's too late to change the training program and just spark up an adventurous training activity. But I came back from that operation, and I had one last crack at, being Peter Pan and staying young forever, and that was giving SAS selection a crack. And I went and did that, and I got injured about 4 days from the end, and just couldn't. Well, I got injured about day 4 and kept going till about 4 days from the end, and just mentally and physically couldn't do it anymore. So I came off that, and then I had a moment of like, what do I want to do with my career? Because I didn't particularly want to be a battery commander in artillery. My body was pretty broken. I was like, I'm not sure I'm going back for another crack at Special Forces. And so I decided to start changing my career path in 2013, and spoke to my careers advisor, which was a really funny conversation, because I walked into the career review, which as a captain should be about 10 minutes, and he thought he had this one nailed, because he walked into me and he's like, mate, I want you to promote a year early and go back and be a battery commander at 1 Reg. And I was like, or I can do an extra year as a captain and go to the adventurous training wing as the 2IC for 2 years.
Because, mate,
And
not blowing smoke, you must have been a bit of a thruster, not only to get on Herrick and have that. There's some serious artillery experience and skills here, like having, fired guns on operations, with the Brits, and then gone back and done there was you did FO gig, supporting 3?
yeah, FO for Alpha Company 3, RAR.
Yeah, so you've actually gone and got some legitimate and some serious artillery skills that the Corps is probably like, we want to embrace and enhance this and then infuse it into the next generation of people coming through.
Yeah, and I did get that, and I was conscious of it, and hence that career interview turned into from what should have been 10 minutes into almost an hour. And it was really good guy, Rob Ryan, just gave me a lot of time. But from my point of view, and I eventually talked him round, and I told him the story I just told you about Townsville. And the way I saw it is that, yes, I had some experience and some skills, but so did a bunch of other people. And I was like, there's always going to be another battery commander coming through. There's no shortage of people that are going to fill those roles. Like in terms of army need, I was like, there's cohorts of artillery officers coming through. Whereas I felt like not enough people were passionate about solving the training gap between theory on a PowerPoint slide of how to cope with fear and stress and then getting shot at. And I was like, I feel like I can point myself at that problem and try and make a difference. And that's why I was aiming for the adventurous training wing. And I said that to me at this point in my career is where I think I'm going to be able to have the most impact for Army.
Mate, this is tops, and I love the courage of the commitment to say, no, this is what I want. This is what's right for me. The poor career manager, mate, he had that name filled in that slot up on the board, and you probably caused him a lot more than an hour work to put somebody else's name into it. But mate, there's always another thruster coming through.
Yeah, he was a big supporter though, and he went and got it for me, right? So he obviously, he once we'd had our chat, and he was sold on my reasoning and my passion for it. He went and got me not only the 2IC job but the OC job, and we went from there. And then it was a case back to your point on it must be all beers and skittles. It probably would be. It probably would have been if we had a full manning.
Yep.
Or like had our full establishment. And it was kind of and it had command direction. Command direction and resources. So establishment, resources, and command direction. And I felt like it was just missing a few things. So we were operating at 50% manning or less.
Because the Army's busy. The Army's busy. You've got deployments everywhere. You've got, probably 3 or 4 trips going on all around the world, and the spot's got to be filled. Yeah.
And so I think any job you do at 50% establishment is going to be busy, right? And so that made it hard. That made it challenging. But then the other part, but it's probably served me well, was I felt like I spent a lot of time at adventurous training justifying or defending the capability to stop it from being fully cut, which wouldn't actually save that much money in the scheme of things, because there weren't many people left, and a lot of what we were using was reservists and things like that to deliver courses and to deliver capability. But it was essentially having to highlight where it should be used, how it should be used. So I was just going through planning iterations and briefing on the future of the capability or the current state of the capability, but making recommendations on how it can be used to best effect. But adventurous training always comes up against a barrier on time and resources. Like when we deployed with 3RAR or any operation, there's a bunch of mandatory training requirements, as you know, that you have to complete before going on operations, and for a lot of the force, they don't get through them. So they eventually, you get to a point where there's just not enough time, and they end up getting wavered. And if mandatory training requirements are getting wavered, then optional ones like adventurous training just aren't going to get a look in.
Let's think about that. Just think of those words. Mandatory means must, not could or should. But it's like literally if you do a whatever is company size activity, and they don't tick the box from a certification or competency perspective, and there's just no time to go back and rerun it through because the next activity, because the program's so jam packed, it's just like, well, should be right, lads.
But I think it's a problem because, for one, adventurous training isn't on the mandatory list, but then we're waiving some of them anyway. But we're saying that being able to cope, being able to know what feeling, stressed or fear feels like, and being able to actively manage that response is not a mandatory requirement to deploy on operations and be shot at. So we're very good. We're good at, the Army is great at teaching soldiers to move, shoot, communicate. However, the one thing we can't do in training is shoot back at them.
Mate, quick question. In all that time you did, and I'm not trying to compare apples and apples, and the grass is always greener, but did you do it with the Brits? Was there that fear component of the training or fear and stress with the British before you went to Herrick?
So I didn't get to do it because they do it on a different cycle. But noting that I went with Airborne, and so I went with 7 Para RHA, so they're jumping out of planes on a semi-regular basis as well. But they had already done their adventurous training in their reset phase, whereas I got there bang on pre-deployment training time. But the Brits are massive on it. So the Brits do it in kind of like a hub and spoke model. So they've got a joint adventurous training headquarters, and then I think they've got about 5 spokes, including a centre in Germany for the forces over there that then facilitate unit adventurous training. And the Brits also use it in their rehabilitation program as part of recovery, which was super interesting. So I think they were my challenges at Adventurous Training Wing. But effectively, I got an opportunity. It was effectively marketing, right? Yeah. So I was having to figure out how to sell adventurous training without actually having to make money off it. As in business, like you have to have a sustainable business. But I was always thinking about, well, where does it fit in? Where does it value add? What's the biggest impact it can have? And how do I communicate this to Colonel, Brigadier, Major General? I had multiple opportunities to brief Gus McLaughlin, who's Commander 4Com at the time. Some of those briefs might have been good. Some of them were probably not so good. But I learned a lot from both on how to communicate at that level. So I got a lot out of that posting, both professionally, but also personally. It gave me a lot of confidence, apart from the business acumen, that I could run that organisation, that I understood that organisation, that I had both the technical skills and the strategic skills to be able to look at where else I could use this. And that kind of led me down a path of, when I got out of the Army, I didn't quite have the confidence to just start Keltus. I got out in 2019, and I wasn't going to start Keltus the next day as such. I knew what I didn't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't confident in all the business side of things. I'd never really built a cost model. I'd done resource planning with the Army, but it's not quite the same as doing cost models and
put it into the top.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of took I took a well-trodden route and just took a couple of years to pause in Canberra and did some work in defence industry, doing some consulting with Downer Professional Services, and found that really an easy landing, a valuable landing, and then worked my way to head of business development at Pen 10, and really started to. That was amazing because that gave me access and experience working with the CEO, the CFO, the whole finance team, the rest of the business development team, and I learnt a lot through that, to the point that I'm really appreciative for that experience and had a really valuable time at that company. But I started to feel confident enough in myself that I wasn't an expert in anything, but I knew enough to be like, I might as well give it a crack now and start this business and apply it, because there's not going to be any better or right time.
And mate, I can just see that kid from Armidale on the back of a horse thinking, am I really going to commit the rest of my life to a suit and tie, scrub up every day when I could be out in the bush and back in the water and back on a cliff top?
It was exactly that moment, and it wasn't that I wasn't enjoying my job, and I've always said if I was gonna work in that space, I'd never have left that job at Pen 10. I really like the people there. I really like the company. This is the funny thing, because people are looking at me going, "You've got a great job." And Dad was the most dumbfounded. He's like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And I was just about to have a first kid. So young Darcy's 18 months now, and literally just after he was born, I kind of went full time into Keltus, although it had been operating for a few years prior. And everything was going swimmingly. And yeah, I absolutely would have stayed there, but it wasn't about that I was unhappy at the time or anything. But I looked, and I was speaking to my partner Ali, and I was like, I've got 25 years of work life left. I'm like, I don't think I can do this for another 25 years. So what does it look like? And if I'm going to start it, I might as well start it now, and get after it, because likewise, I fully expect my body to break down from years of pack marching and whatnot eventually. And so my time of spending on the side of the cliff and through canyons has probably got a time limit on it as well.
Mate, I grew up in the Blue Mountains, and we spent our lives growing up on those cliff tops, and running through those gullies, and swimming in the swimming holes out in the bush out there. Keltus. I've just been listening to this whole journey through, and from those, first of all, the spirit of being a country kid and just being out there in the bush, through your army career, through these deployments, through seeing lying back into training analysis and training gaps, and your statement again. You don't rise, you fall to the. Sorry, can you just confirm your little catchphrase there, because I love it.
Yes, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training. And I think, I'll give you the example. So after I kind of identified this in Townsville and we had the theory, I reckon we had a short break after that, and then we were in Afghanistan, and I think we were in Afghanistan for 3 weeks. I was out at Duraywood area, and we went out to a patrol base in the Tangi Valley, and it was pretty much our first or second. I think it was our second patrol, and we went east to this patrol base, and it was pretty much known that if you went east, you got shot at. And we were walking along next to a road, and we started copping pretty effective fire. So rounds falling within about 3 meters of guys' feet, and the only cover was one compound wall with a ditch next to it on our right. And everyone just went in there, and our fire and movement was good because people went back to their training. But then once they got to cover, we weren't ineffective, but there was a not insignificant period of time that it took us to be productive again. And I even joked with a mate. He was actually a mate I went through school with, and he was an engineer on that trip. And I was like, mate, can you put your head up and see where that's coming from? And he told me to bugger off and told me to do it. And there was a bit of that, though. I was like, who's going to get this show moving? Because currently we've got a whole patrol, like we've got 30 people closed up into one foxhole. And we've got another call sign that's another section, so another 10 guys that are pinned down elsewhere. We have to do something to support them. And there was some really good leadership that stood up that day from Adam Siri, and who was a captain, patrol commander on that trip, and there was another, and his sergeant did a great job of being like, this is the plan, we're getting moving. But it was enough time for me to just notice that individual reactions will vary. And I think our reaction time was reflective of how much we'd practiced it in pre-deployment training, which was deep breathing on a syndicate room floor.
You are now trained to deal with trauma and stress, and you will just lie back on your back and look at the sky and breathe for 15 seconds, and everything will be okay. Yeah. Just a quick one on that little contact there, or not little contact, but you and your mate are the supporting elements. You're the FO, and mate was the engineer. How do you feel, playing your role of letting the infantry, leaders do their job?
Yeah, that was it was a funny day. Like I love supporting the infantry, and I love my relationship with Adam. But basically from that foxhole, myself and that engineer went and jumped up on a compound roof to try and get. I had to do two things. I had to get eyes on the enemy, and I needed, because of the valley we're in, I needed to set up SATCOM.
Because you're the FO, you're ready to call
Yeah.
in support. You're ready to call in bombs or whatever's coming.
Yeah, but I couldn't do much until I got SATCOM.
Hmm.
So basically, jumped on the roof. I got eyes on. He set up my SATCOM antenna for me. That got me communications with the headquarters at Tarankout, and what I wanted, because the infantry commander's plan was, and I give Adam a lot of cheek for this, but was to basically, either side of the river
Yep.
is the river's about 300 meters, 150 meters of fertile farming land, but it's just flat, it's just open. And his plan was to, and the enemy shot at us from the other side of the river, as you do, on the other side of a nice obstacle. And he wanted to do probably one of the biggest right flankers I've ever seen in my life, through open ground, and then come up through the compounds on the far side of the river. And I was like, mate, I am not doing that without Apaches. And so I was on the blower looking for an air weapons team, a couple of Apaches, and I basically brought the US Apaches in to effectively hover right above the green zone there, and then we went. But he wanted to get moving. I kind of refused without fire
Give me
support.
10 minutes, mate. Just give me 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, just give me 10, 15 minutes. We'll be fine. But I was like, that's a terrible plan. Like, basics of RMC shoots have fire support, right? Otherwise we're going to need a lot more smoke. So, anyway, we eventually had that discussion, and I won out, and I got the Apaches there before we did the right flanker. But that was our job, right? I certainly wasn't going to advise him on, as such, like his maneuver plan. It was just about, I was like, hey mate, this is the best way I can support you. Like, I've got guns laid on the target from FOB Hadrian. I've got an air weapons team coming. Then if we run across open ground, I've got everything I need to support you.
Yeah.
And that was my role.
Mate, what a gig. I love it. My experience with Apaches, like being the cappuccino and a bed guy in Tarankout every day. I remember I sent some photos to a mate of mine, Fozzie, but we actually went and sat in an Apache, mate. That was about, went to the other side of the airfield and sat in one and got some gratuitous photos. But, mate, I just love listening to, it's such a privilege for me to just listen to these stories, mate, and just to sort of share voyeuristically. I feel like I've had the best spectator career of my life, watching and supporting like people like you do your thing.
Yeah.
Mate, I want to get into the last little bit about Keltus, because everything we've been talking today about is really Keltus in a nutshell. And what you're doing now from a commercial perspective is exactly what you've been led or drawn or just been passionate about, through this whole time. And, when you're briefing, brigadiers or whoever, 1-2 star colonels about, why, adventurous training is great for their teams, you're now doing this for the corporate world.
Yeah, and that was always the objective, because when I ran the adventurous training wing, my hope was that I would advance Army's capability, and they effectively wouldn't need outsourced adventure training or resilience training. But I saw the application for the corporate space and the elite sports space, and that's where I wanted to go. And that's why I started. And the first activity I ran was for a corporate consulting group in Canberra, and they there's a number of use cases that people want it for. Team cohesion, particularly at the start of the year, or to reset, for leadership development programs and leading under pressure and leading through conflict and that sort of thing, or elite sports like performance under pressure. So elite sports is very similar dynamic, I think, to Army, because what's similar is getting shot at will force a response, a physiological and psychological response, and similarly, not saying it's the same as being shot at, but Courtney Vine lining up for the 11th penalty kick in the Women's World Cup semi-final, that moment with the largest crowd in that stadium is going to cause a physiological and psychological response. And if you haven't trained it, you're not going to rise to the occasion. And so, I can, that's why I think athletes is a very similar use case, and why it applies really well is they're same as soldiers. They're at the top of their game, so they're physically fit. They've got the skill. They just need to be able to apply it in the moment. And soldiers are the same. We're incredibly, when we deploy, we're incredibly skilled, incredibly well trained. We just have to make sure we can apply it when we're under pressure. And adventurous training, or resilience training, leadership training in an outdoor environment, it's literally just a mechanism. So abseiling, climbing, canyoning is a mechanism to force that response so that you can train it. You can't force it in a classroom. You can only talk about the theory of it.
And it's when things go wrong when this matters, not when things are going rosy and peachy. Like on the sports field, what happens when you lose momentum? What happens when the other team is, you're literally falling backwards, and then you take a big knock, and your head's ringing, and everything's starting to fall apart. What are you leaning back upon? And I come back to that. You fall back to your best level of training.
100%. If you're winning an NRL game by 30 points, then you're probably not going to fall back on this training, right?
Yeah.
But when the scores go level at 12-all in the grand final and there's 6 minutes to go, you start. Well, what have you done for that moment? I guess because it's not. I don't believe that moment, for instance, or that scenario is about physical fitness, because every team's done the work, right? Every team's as fit as each other. They lift the same weights. They run the same distances. Both teams should be just as fit. That's about who wants it more, who trusts each other the most, who can calm themselves down in the moment and make good decisions. It's about much more than fitness in the last 10 minutes.
It's one thing to have the DI looking over your shoulder, like, what's next, platoon commander? What's next, section commander? What are you doing next? In that moment of chaos. But when you're playing the real game, whether it be in sport or in business, and you don't have that person to rely on, and you're the one making the decision. You had a really interesting user case for this program when it comes to venture capital investments. I thought it was really clever. Share your thoughts on the application of Keltus' work with those people in particular.
Yeah, so I think venture capitalists, or anyone that's in a position where they're investing or they're relying on people's character. So whether you're selecting people for a leadership position or for venture capitalists, they're effectively, yes, they're investing in a company, but they're really investing in the founder. The founder's the one that's going to have to get the work done. And so there's a number of things you want to know for a venture capitalist before you part with that investment, or for maybe before you go into business with somebody, or before you take on your next leadership team, is because they're significant salaries you're about to pay these people. And like you say, it's not about what those people are like when it's going well. It's about what happens when pressure mounts and you have to work big hours. And we want to find out their character. And the Army does this in a number of ways as well. Like if you think about Exercise Shaggy Ridge, 6-7 days of food and sleep deprivation and physical activity that they put us through at Royal Military College. That's that in essence is about seeing our character and what happens when we get put under the pump, right? And special forces selections built around a similar thing. It's about seeing character. The problem is for corporates and venture capitalists is they don't have 6-7 days to put people through training, and nor do they probably have the appetite to starve them like the Army does to us to see character and see how we operate under those conditions.
Mate, HR will be all over no one.
But there's a common theme in the adventurous training space. If you can create the right activity, people have a very hard time maintaining a facade when they are under fear and stress. They just can't do it. You'll ultimately, it reveals character very quickly. And I'm talking about traits like, the thing you want in a leader or a team member is one that can, be stressed or be scared, and not only look after themselves, or despite being scared themselves, is look after somebody else. Whereas what we continually see in people, even people that want to be leaders or consider themselves leaders, is once they get put under the pump, they start to look after number one, and everything goes internal, and they look after themselves. And if I'm looking at investing in somebody, or I'm looking at my next leadership, my next leaders of programs and whatnot, there's some key indicators and traits that I'm looking for that I don't want within my team, and so it basically just reveals behaviour, and it's you can do it in a day, you can do it in 2 days, but there's some key indicators that you can reveal that are worth knowing before they make an investment or in either founders or employees.
So the first time you push back on that first pitch at Boar's Head, and you've never been over the side before, sort of seeing how people react to these moments and how they build it as a team. I remember one time, I don't know if you ever done caving down at Yass, not too far from Canberra, but I'm not a skinny petite guy, and I remember we did caving and we went through this little, it was called a squeeze, and I remember we were in this little sort of area and the instructor's like, go and have a look over there and see if there's a way through. And I was like, there's no way through, mate. You can't get through there. And he goes, go have another look. And as soon as he did that, I was like, oh man, that means there's a way through there. And I couldn't see a way through. And ultimately, there was this one a little bit later on called the Fisher's Freckle, where I had to go through feet first. And I got to the point where I couldn't, my chest, not that I'm big chested, but I couldn't get through without someone pulling my feet at the other side, man.
Yeah.
And just listening to my heart just race as you're going through these moments. And I also think, when you're coming back to the corporate side of it, there's one thing to test someone's character before you invest in them, but let's not forget about the actual giving them the skills to act under that. So there's the one thing of identifying, is this the right character for me? But let's push people through this resilience and give them the school. Let's give them that exposure. So when things do go bad, they have a better toolkit to deal with it.
Yeah, correct. So very different programs. So, and one of the most important things, and every discovery call that I do with clients is the first thing I try and ascertain or have to ascertain is the objective of the activity.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the activity or the program is about ruthlessly designing and delivering it to that object and debriefing it to that objective. And so like a character assessment sort of program is very different to a development program. And so a development program, ultimately you want them to be longer because it's about going through multiple iterations of an experiential learning cycle, because you want to give people the time to have an experience, basically test and adjust that experience, reflect on it, test and adjust, and reapply it. And the more times you can do that, the better they'll get at implementing what they've learnt. But yeah, absolutely. I'm working on a leadership program this year, which is an interesting use case, but not an uncommon problem among the corporate world. This company has acquired some companies, but ultimately the founders of those companies will all leave at some point in the next couple of years, and so they're looking at growing the next bunch of leaders that are going to step up. So they've selected their next most likely candidates, and throughout the course of this year, they're going through multiple touch points of a leadership program, and they've recognised that it's not just about these leaders leading when it all goes right. What happens when pressure hits, and that they have conflict in the workplace and that sort of thing. And so the culmination activity for that will be towards the end of this year, and putting these eight participants or these 8 trainees through abseiling, climbing, and canyoning activities, and looking at how they lead under pressure. Because I'm sure when you're down at Wee Jasper, I'm sure you did amazing, Pete. But when people are under that fear and stress, you can start to see their demeanour change, and their communication changes. It might get snappy, it might get authoritative, or it might cease. Yeah, so the communication might just go quiet, and they just have auditory exclusion, and you can't get a word out of them. But either way, it's not productive for an organisation. And similar to our responses to fear and stress back in the workplace, whatever symptoms or signs and symptoms they show there will be the same when work gets hard. They'll either shut down or they'll get authoritative, and so we can start to develop those and look at what are the most productive traits that you want to be able to exhibit in this situation, and then how do you apply that back in the workplace.
Mate, you just slipped in there a beautiful little army term, auditory exclusion.
Yeah.
Mate, my kids are, after 7 weeks of being home, my kids went back to school this morning, and I am enjoying the peace and quiet around here. Mate, Keltus.au, we're going to have all the links in all of that. Just before we go, mate, look, I really appreciate your time, and I love your work. Not only is this program, like exciting and exhilarating for what it can do from a personal perspective, the way that you've developed it over years of lived experience, either in the training environment, in the combat environment, and building these programs down at the Army Adventure Training Wing has really led to, a world-class program for leadership. So, mate, I think it's ducks nuts, mate. Well done.
Thanks so much, Pete, and thanks for your time today.
Hey, just before we go, I think we got to shout out Feed for Thought, don't we? Just while
Yeah,
we're on here as well.
Yeah, we're absolutely a business orientated family now. So yeah, Ali is the CEO and founder of Feed for Thought, which is a insect protein dog food. So the key protein in the dog food is made from insects. Two key things that effectively it's a sustainable product because it uses less resources. Less resource intensive, less water, less deforestation, etc. In order to grow and farm insects, but it's also a novel protein source, so it's low allergenic. Dogs effectively haven't had the chance to develop allergies to it. It's for the same reasons that crocodile meat and venison and kangaroo were introduced into dog food lines because they needed a novel protein compared to beef and chicken and lamb that dogs all developed allergies to.
Yeah.
And insect proteins is essentially your next line. So, Feed for Thought, she's going really strong with that, and it's great to see the business doing so well. I guess important for this podcast, she has a veteran discount code, so please reach out. She always wants to look after veterans and look after the community that's been so good to us. And I'm sure you'll get her on shortly for.
Mate, I want to get her on, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's look. First of all, I think it's fantastic that you guys are running these parallel journeys, but ultimately, the aspiration of enterprise and entrepreneurship is running deep between the two of you.
Yeah, it's great. It's a good journey. It's always a challenging one, but one we're enjoying living.
Excellent. Mate, let's wrap it there. Appreciate your time coming on. Next time you're settled up there on the beautiful mid-north coast of New South Wales, I'm actually going to be up at Port Macquarie in about, next weekend. Maybe I can even sneak up and swing by and say good day.
Yeah, mate, let's touch base. See what we can do. That's not far.
Brilliant. Righty, mate. Take care, Dan. If you want to learn more about Keltus, it is keltus.au on the website. To have all of those links and that down, and and Dan's everywhere on social media and that as well. So, mate, thanks very much. Let's wrap it there. This is another episode of the Veteran Business Community Podcast. Dan Fussell, thanks for your time.